And as I mentioned at the top of the show, GB News star Nigel Farage has rocked the establishment this week by exposing the illustrious British bank Coutts, who ruthlessly closed his account after claiming issues with commercial viability. The bank has now been forced into an embarrassing U-turn after Nigel exposed the real reasons for its closure, his perhaps controversial but entirely legitimate political opinions, as well as his friendships with public figures, including Donald Trump and Novak Djokovic, with Coutts, remember, saying he did not align with their values. So, Anne Widdecombe, this is a massive victory, not just for Farage over Coutts, but actually for free speech champions over the establishment.
Yes, that is true, but I'm rather disappointed by the government's response. Now, they acted quickly as far as banks go, say they'll change the law, etc. Now, they've already imposed a free speech law on universities. Now they're going to do it effectively on the banks. But why do it piecemeal? The fact is, throughout this country, you can be cancelled just for having the wrong views. And there should be an overarching law which makes a presumption in favour of free speech, and it should cover not just banks and not just universities. It should cover businesses, great and small, with their employees and their customer accounts. It should cover theatres, it should cover cinemas, it should cover local councils, absolutely anything, anywhere, it should cover. Doing it piecemeal won't meet the case, Rishi.
That's a good point, actually. But, Anne, so many aspects of this story completely stink. Like the fact the BBC was doing the bidding of Coutts after the chief executive, Rose, had been at this awards do, this establishment awards do, probably quaffing champagne with Simon Jack, the BBC business editor. He reported something as fact, clearly based on a source at Coutts. Now that's been exposed as a complete lie. Should the BBC be apologising here for false reporting? Maybe we need to get that BBC Verify unit onto this claim.
Yeah, the BBC, of course, it should apologise, but I think the crucial thing here is that if they did have a source at the bank, and we all think we know who it was, but if they did have a source at the bank, that is such a breach of client confidentiality that that person should be obliged to resign. And my question is, why hasn't that person already resigned? I mean, the poor old BBC, have a heart. They must have thought they'd got the scoop of the century when, this story was given to them, that poor old Nigel, he didn't have enough money in his account. They really must have thought, it's this wonderful thing. They should have learnt from the past. They should have learnt from the Cliff Richard fiasco. They should know that actually it's probably better to get things checked out. And if you're going to mess around with people, don't mess around with Farage. And he's the last person they should have been messing around with.
Very good point. Now, Rishi Sunak has lashed out at the Labour Party, and as ongoing industrial action continues to cripple the country. So he's written for the Daily Telegraph and said the opposition have shown total unwillingness to stand up to the unions, even with those demanding unaffordable rises of 35%. Sir Keir Starmer has failed to rule out meeting their requests. The impact of the strikes by these unions cannot be underestimated. A 94-year-old great-grandmother from Canterbury was forced to drag her wheelie bin 2 miles to the nearest tip after waiting 3 weeks for striking refuse workers to correct it. So, Anne, that's the human cost of these strikes. Is Sunak right to say that Labour is unwilling to do anything about this, given the unions effectively still run the Labour Party?
I mean, yes, for once in his life, Rishi's actually talking common sense, which doesn't happen every time that he pronounces, but I think he's absolutely right. And by the way, just as an aside, I hope that poor old lady is going to get a rebate from her council tax, because she certainly deserves it. She's paid for a service she's not receiving. But it also, that story, brings home the message that people always suffer when there's a strike on. People who can't get hospital treatment, people who can't get a flight to see family, not just for a holiday, maybe dying family, maybe sick family. There's always somebody somewhere who suffers. And with this bin strike, you had an old lady who has an immense amount of energy. I hope I can do that at 94. I really do. But this was somebody who was suffering. Now, it's true what Rishi says. Labour has done nothing about saying what it would do with the unions. Is it going to give in to all their demands? Is it going to resist them? What is it going to do? We don't hear All we know is they certainly don't challenge the unions, who are, of course, largely their paymasters. So I think that what you can say here is that Keir Starmer has failed, and Rishi Sunak is now pointing out the blooming obvious. But now they should press that. It is no good, Rishi, just say it and then move on to another topic. They should press and press and press that in Parliament, in the media, everywhere they can. People should be pointing out that Keir Starmer has basically stuck his head in the sand and is taking no position at all on public suffering.
Now, and Prince George, this is really interesting. Apparently, he is not going to be expected to serve in the armed forces before he becomes king, which will, of course, break a centuries-old precedent within the British monarchy. I hear you're not a big fan of this move, Anne.
I think it's insane. I mean, I think if that really is what William's decided, we only had one report, but if that really is what William's decided, he's just lost the plot. I mean, there's a very good reason why heirs to the throne serve in the armed services. It's not because there's some fluffy tradition. It is because the armed services take their oath of allegiance to the monarch, and it is the monarch who signs off the order for war. And therefore, when they take that oath of loyalty to the monarch, they need to be able to feel that he or she is one of them. And they can't feel that if that monarch's never, ever been in the armed services. It doesn't have to be a very lengthy time.
But Anne, what if William and Kate know young George and know that this would be like a Prince Edward moment? Do you remember when Prince Edward was forced to enter, and it was a disaster, Anne? He wasn't made for that. It didn't suit the type of guy that he was.
Didn't matter in Prince Edward's case because he was umpteen in line by that time and always knew that he would slip further down as his older siblings had their own children. So it really didn't matter in Edward's case, and I was not one of those who condemned Edward at the time, actually. I said, look, I think he was fourth in line then, just let him go his own way. But this is different. This is the person to whom the armed services will pledge allegiance. And if he can't be bothered to serve, or is too scared to serve, or doesn't really think it will be terribly congenial to serve, that is not going to work. I don't know what William is thinking of if he has actually said that. I can only hope the king bashes some sense into their heads.
Oh, my goodness. And you're just like, George, like it or not, you're going in the Navy.
Yes. Or, if he decides that he doesn't want royal life, if that's what he decides, I respect that, but then he gives up his birthright.
Wow. Tough talking. Anne Widdecombe. Big Woody style. Great to speak to you, Anne. I'll speak next week.